Corsair's latest PC case comes in 3 different versions that all use the same core chassis. The 3500X is a bare case with no fans included. The 3500X RGB includes 3 RS120 RGB fans, and the iCUE Link 3500X RGB gives you 3 RX120 RGB fans and an iCUE Link hub. We picked the iCUE Link version of the case to review because it's the most expensive, and so we can show you everything that is on offer. So the Corsair 3500X, it's available in 3 different versions. There's the 3500X with no fans that cost £85 including VAT. Or there's a slightly more expensive 3500X RGB that comes with 3 RS120 fans. That's £120 including VAT. Then the flagship version is the iCUE Link 3500X RGB with 3 RX120 RGB fans and an included Corsair iCUE Link hub. That will set you back £170 including VAT here in the UK. According to Corsair, the 3500X has all the essential features needed to build an amazing system, including up to EATX motherboard support, side, roof and PSU shroud fan mounting options with up to 10 120mm fans supported. It's equipped with wraparound front and side tempered glass for an unrestricted view inside. There's support for multiple radiator installation, including 360mm in the roof and side, and enough room to accommodate most large graphics cards and CPU coolers. It's also validated for use with back connect motherboards such as MSI Project Zero and Asus BTF, so the view isn't spoiled by the connected cables. The front I/O is mounted on the top of the case towards the front, and that consists of a single USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type C port, 2 USB 3.2 Gen 1 Type A ports, and a single combined 3.5mm audio jack. There's also power and reset buttons up there. To remove side panels, it's really easy with the 3500X. This tempered glass side panel just pops out from the rear and then you can lift it out. It's on those quick release pins. It is a clear tempered glass, but it does have a bit of a green tint to it, especially down these edges here. You can see the green tint, and you can also see a bit of the green tint on this white border. So the white border doesn't perfectly match the white steel panels in this case. The front tempered glass removes in the same way. Again, it's quick release, just push it out from the top and then releases at the bottom. Again, it's got the border around it, and again, this has this kind of green tint to it, so it's not a perfect match to the steel panels. Top panel is easy to remove. There's a tab at the back. You just push that up. Again, it's quick release, and you can see it's got a big ventilated section to this top panel. Corsair's gone with this kind of weird Y-shaped mesh in this. It does look effective. It gives kind of an attractive or different look to it. Inside there is a dust filter in there. It's a magnetic dust filter. It's a perforated steel dust filter. Removes quite easily. There's a bit of flex in these panels, so maybe they're not manufactured from the thickest steel. Rear panel's similar. Pushes out from the back and then just lifts out. Again, it's got the Y-shaped mesh design and a magnetic perforated steel dust filter, and again you can see there's a fair bit of flex in these panels, so probably don't feel the most high quality that I've ever seen or tested, but they serve the purpose. In terms of the actual chassis core frame, this is actually quite rigid. I'm quite surprised actually that at the top corner there, if you press down on that, there's not a lot of flex in that, so that's surprising. So there's obviously the way that this has been folded and bent, it gives it a bit more structural rigidity. That's good to see, but there is a little bit of twist in the chassis frame, so it's not bad. It feels reasonably strong, but there is a little bit of flex there. So this is the iCUE Link 3500X RGB. Because of that, you get 3 Corsair RX120 RGB fans come pre-installed in the side of the case. There's also an iCUE Link hub around the other side that we'll take a look at later. In terms of cooling support, so in the roof of the case, You can install up to 320mm fans or up to a 360mm radiator. Also, two 140s can be installed up here, or a 280mm radiator. Same down the side, so it's three 120s or two 140mm fans or up to a 360mm radiator in the side mount. On the floor, you've also got a spot at the front of the power supply shroud. There you can install either a 120 or a 140mm fan. On top of the power supply shroud, there's space there for two 120mm fans. And then at the rear of the case, there's a spot here for another 120mm fan or 120mm radiator. But none of these radiator and fan mounts are removable. The top and the side fixed in position. I do like removable radiator brackets, so that's a bit of a shame to see that both of those are completely fixed in position. Maximum CPU cooler height is 170mm tall. Some of the larger dual tower air coolers should fit in here quite comfortably. Motherboard support is up to EATX, so that includes EATX, ATX, micro ATX, ITX, and it also supports back connect motherboards, so MSI Project Zero and Asus BTF. The maximum graphics card length in here is up to 410mm, so if you take something that's pretty big like this Gigabyte RTX 4080 Aero, you'll see that fits in absolutely no problem whatsoever. At the rear, the PCIe slots are either 7 in horizontal mode, or you can take out a few screws at the back, and then the PCIe slots come out completely. Just spin them round to vertical mode, and then you've got 4 vertical PCIe slots available there. You are left with like this gaping hole in here. There's nothing to cover that up with, and it might be a bit difficult getting to these screws once you've got a system installed if you need to remove graphics card. And there's no included riser cable or vertical mounting kit with the case. In terms of cable management around this side of the case, obviously as well as all the cutouts for the back connect motherboards, you've got a couple of cable cutouts at the top of the motherboard tray. There's 2 more on top of the power supply shroud, and then there's several down the side here. There's also a bit of a channel here at the front in case you put a front mounted fan on the floor, you can run the cables behind that. It's a pretty standard layout around here, so there's a 120mm fan mount, rear I/O for the motherboard, PCIe slots, and then below that the mount for the power supply. You'll also notice there's some eyelets here, so potentially you can gather all your rear cables up and keep them neat there, put some zip ties on. And there's also this kind of a pass-through for cables, but it actually says on the cover it's iCUE link, so I'm guessing there's some desktop product that extends from out of the case there, and there's going to be a cable that can screw into there by the looks of it, so you're probably going to be able to, at some point, if you can't already, extend iCUE link to your desktop. Then around this right hand side you can see the 3 RX 120 fans, and you can see that this is also adapted for 120 or 140mm fan mounts. It's very close to the side panel, this, so there's no chance of moving fans to the back of this and creating more space in the front. You can also again see the cable in here, which I like to see is white, but the cables from this iCUE link, the power cable and the USB cable, they're black. I would have liked to have seen those in white too to match the aesthetics of the case. This is quite handy how it fits into a little recess on this panel. It's a magnetic, this hub. It's got 2 ports. You can install tons of iCUE link hardware to those 2 ports, so 2 ports isn't a problem. This here is a panel for storage. It's got a thumb screw on the bottom, but it's very tight and it's a bit awkward to get your thumbs in and twist it with the shape of that, so it's easy to take it off with a screwdriver. So you remove that. On here you can install 2 2.5 and 2 3.5 inch drives simultaneously. The only thing with that is if you do install 2 3.5 inch drives, you lose this recess for the iCUE link hub, and there isn't really anywhere else that is specifically designed to put it on the case. So that is a bit of a design flaw, I'd say, but to be fair, for a gaming system, or you're going to be installing two 3.5-inch drives. I doubt it. Around this side again, you can see the cable cutouts for back connect and then the regular motherboard cable cutouts. There's also plenty of places with eyelets for tying cables down to. There's a bit of a channel here as well for maybe routing your EPS cables down and through at the back there. At the bottom, the power supply shroud supports ATX power supplies up to 180mm long. There's one more dust filter in the system, and that's on the floor, and it pulls out from the front, quite easy to remove. It's a nylon dust filter on a plastic frame. 4 plastic feet, one on each corner of the case, about 25mm tall for some ground clearance and airflow in from the bottom. There's some anti-vibration rubbers on there. With the dust filter removed, you can see the case floor is very open. It's got that same wide design mesh at the front, the 120 and 140mm mount and intake there, and then a larger mesh at the rear for the power supply. You don't get much in the way of accessories with the 3500X. You just get some assorted screws, some zip ties, and then a front panel adapter cable. So for the test system build, I used an Intel Core i7-14700K CPU. Motherboard is a Gigabyte Z790 Aorus Elite AX ICE. Graphics card is the Palette RTX 4070 Ti Super Gaming Pro. Memory is 64GB G.SKILL Ripjaws M5 RGB. It's DDR5 6000 megatransfers per second. Storage is just a single 1TB M.2 drive. It's a Corsair MP700 PCIe Gen 5 NVMe M.2 SSD. I did use some additional fans for testing different scenarios in the thermal performance test. I used some of the additional RX 120 RGB, the iCUE Link RX 120 RGB fans. I mounted a couple on top of the power supply shroud, one on the floor, they're both intakes, and one at the rear as exhaust. Obviously tested the different scenarios with those fans installed and without those fans installed, and just the 3 pre-installed fans. The CPU cooler for the thermal testing and for the test build is the brand new Corsair iCUE Link Titan 360 RX RGB 360mm all-in-one liquid cooler. The actual CPU block cap, you can swap that out for different designs. Corsair has like an LCD screen, there's a VRM fan cap, and just a different one with RGB lighting effects on there. They are available separately. I've just reviewed that recently, the Titan 360 RX RGB. The full written review is over on kitguru.net. If you're interested to see how that performs, head over to the website and go and check it out. Power supply in the system, it's a Seasonic Vertex GX1200, and it's a white power supply, white cables, so I think everything is looking pretty nice and it's turned out looking well. The actual build process in this case is okay. It integrates well with other iCUE Link components like this AIO. It's quite easy routing the iCUE Link cables and connecting up additional iCUE Link fans and additional iCUE Link hardware like the CPU cooler. I do have a few pros and cons to go over about the build process and about the 3500X in general. We'll talk about those in a moment, but first let's take a look at the thermal performance. If you want to check out the full case testing methodology, there will be a written page over at kitguru.net with all the testing methodology on there, so head over there and check that out. But it's our usual thermal performance test, which is a combined Cinebench R23 and 3D Mark Speedway stress test run simultaneously for 30 minutes. Having just 3 pre-installed side fans in the 3500X is enough intake to keep CPU and GPU temperatures under control. 68 degrees C over ambient for the 14700K and 42 degrees for the 4070 Ti Super is the norm for this CPU and GPU configuration in a good airflow case. Adding additional intake fans to the power supply shroud and floor, as well as an additional rear exhaust fan, didn't change the CPU or GPU temperature enough to justify the additional cost. So doing this would purely be for aesthetic reasons only. The only significant drop in CPU temperature was with all the case panels removed, which technically makes the case an open frame. So in its default configuration with panels installed and with the 3 pre-installed fans, the 3500X works well. Due to the solid thermal performance, noise levels were kept super low under load. Even in the hottest configuration with all case panels installed, the maximum noise output was just 43 decibels because the CPU fans only needed to ramp up to around 1400 RPM to keep the CPU temperature under 90 degrees C using our custom fan curve. Adding additional fans didn't increase noise because these fans could run at around 600 RPM while keeping system temperature in check, so they were not running fast enough to be heard over the CPU and GPU fans. So the Corsair iCUE Link 3500X RGB in white, it has its pros and cons, it has its good points and its bad points. I like the RX 120 fans that come pre-installed. I like the fact that it is available with this iCUE Link version, and it comes with that iCUE Link hub already pre-installed. You've got that little panel on the back where the iCUE Link hub fits in. That's all nice. I would have liked to have seen those power cables to the hub in white. It integrates really well with other iCUE Link hardware, so installing the AIO and the additional fans, it's simply just a case of connecting them to each other and then to the iCUE Link hub, which is already pre-wired. It's really easy. Install the iCUE software, that auto configures everything, and away you go, you're all set, and the system is more or less ready to use. That is reflected in the price, though. You do pay quite a premium to have those 3 fans and the iCUE Link hub pre-installed. And in our thermal performance test, it seems to perform well with just the stock 3 intake fans. You don't really need to add additional fans if you're using a top mounted AIO, so there's no real need to add these extra fans on the power supply, shroud and the floor as intakes. It works well enough in terms of thermal performance with a reasonably high spec system with just those 3 intake fans that come pre-installed. But I do have a few issues with the case. The white border around the glass, because the glass has a bit of a green tint, it does give that white border a bit of a green tint also. Doesn't match perfectly with the steel panels. It's also missing a lot of basic features that I'd expect to see in a case of this price. There's no graphics card anti-sag bracket. This card doesn't really suffer from sag, but I could have just done with lifting it up a millimeter or so, and there's no bracket integrated into the case, which is something you often see in cases these days at this kind of price point. There's no grommets, no rubber grommets on the cable cutouts around the motherboard. That's another thing that you'd expect to see in a case in this kind of price range. And there's no removable radiator or fan brackets. The one down the side of the motherboard tray, that's not crucial for that one to be removable, but sometimes it is a bit easier for installing fans on your desk or your bench and then installing it all to the case. But the top one, I really do like that to be a removable bracket, because say you forget to connect something to the top of the motherboard tray like an EPS cable or one of the fans or something like that, it is much easier to get access to the top of the motherboard with a radiator installed. If you've got a removable top bracket, you can just loosen off the top bracket, lift it up a little bit. It's a lot easier to get in. So again, it's just another feature that I would expect from a case at this price point. There's a couple other little things, like when you switch round the PCIe slots at the back for vertical mounting, you're left with that big gap at the top. Some of the panels, like the top panel and the side panel, they've got a lot of flex in those panels. They seem to be manufactured from quite thin steel. They're very flexible, and it kind of gives the case in those areas a bit of a cheap feel, which is a bit of a shame, and it's not something you expect from a premium Corsair product. So that's the Corsair iCUE Link 3500X RGB. Let me know what you think of the case in the comment section. If you've enjoyed watching this review, don't forget to give it a thumbs up. Hit the subscribe button if you're not already subscribed to Kit Guru. If you enjoy what we do here at Kit Guru and you want to help support us, you could always head over to the store, pick up some of our merch, or you could even subscribe to our Patreon. And as always, if you want to catch up on all the in-depth technical reviews, head over to the website.